Hi, my name's May. I love yarn, I love to knit and crochet, and I also happen to have been born visually impaired, legally blind, and completely colorblind. So I knit and crochet by feel. In today's video, we're going to talk about a few tips for casting on our knitting projects. And specifically, we're going to talk about a few tips for joining in the round as well, and working as somebody with a visual impairment. And I realize that the majority of you are not working with a visual impairment, but people experience vision changes throughout their life, and a lot of people experience deteriorating eyesight, and even if that's not the case, these still might be helpful to you. So, today we're going to work with some cotton. It's by Knit Picks We Crochet. It's a DK weight yarn. And we're going to be working on some US size 3.75 millimeter needles. Now, if you're a returning viewer to my channel, you know something that I often say is that I knit really tight and I bind off really tight. Well, then that shouldn't be any surprise that I also cast on really tightly. So one of the things that I do to help me is that I double up my needles, okay? So I have got, well, as somebody who's visually impaired, I'm going to be working on a circular project in the round, so it's going to have a front and a back, but it's going to be a skirt, and there really is no difference between the front and the back, but I still like to keep track, right, where I'm at on my needles. So one thing that I do is I'll work with two different types of needles. Now, these are interchangeable needles. You certainly can do this with fixed circular needles. I can use double pointed needles sometimes. I'm not very good with double points, but I do try every now and then. It doesn't matter what types of needles that you work with. But something that I do is that I use, when I'm working in the round, sometimes I'll try to use, like, I have a wood laminate needle, and then I have a nickel plated needle. And so that way it's very easy for me to identify by feel, right, which needle is which. And another thing that I do is I will use different lengths of cables. So I know that for these, I've got my nickel plated needle here is on a 40-inch cable, and my wood laminate needle is on a 47-inch cable. So that is a couple of things that I do as somebody with a visual impairment. But another thing that I do when I cast on is that I take my long needle, right, and I take this whole needle, and because I've got this 47-inch cable, I've literally just fold it in half so that my two needle tips are parallel to each other from the same needle, and they're pointing in the same direction. And then at the other end of this, I have this long loop, and that's because I do cast on really tightly. And I use the long tail cast on. This is not a tutorial on how to do the long tail canvas. This is not at all a tutorial on the long tail cast on. It's just a little tip that I like to do is to hold these two needles parallel, and that way I've got a lot more space in there so that my cast on isn't so tight, because working that first row or round, especially when you're new to knitting and especially when you're working by feel, can be really difficult. And so for me, that's something that I'll do is I'll cast on over these two needles held parallel, and then once I have my stitches on, you can just pull this other half out really easily. And that way it's nice and loose. So that's the first tip that I want to tell people. And then another thing is that when I first started to learn how to join in the round, if you're working in the round, what does it say? Join to work in the round, being careful not to twist, right? And that was such a struggle for me. Joining in the round and not twisting my project was very, very challenging for me. And I would twist my project and have to rip it out and start it over and over and over. And I just played with it and experimented and tried finding all kinds of ways to join in the round. So today I thought I would share with you how I join in the round to make sure that my project isn't twisted. So I am working on a skirt. I'm going to be starting one of my skirts that I've designed. And for my size on a DK weight yarn, we're going to start at the top. We're going to work it top down. We're going to work on the waistband. And so for me, I need 112 stitches. Well, that's the number of stitches I'm going to work on. I'm going to have 112 stitches. I'm going to divide that in half, and I'm going to work with 56 stitches on each needle. So no matter what, if I'm working in the round and I need to join my project in the round, no matter how many stitches I need, no matter what pattern I'm working, I always just do a +1. I add one extra stitch to the cast on, no matter what the pattern is, no matter what I'm doing. If it says join in the round, being careful not to twist, I just add a +1. So for my skirt that I designed, when I know I want to work on 112 stitches with 56 stitches on each needle, I am going to cast on 113 stitches, okay? Now, I'm not going to do all of that with you, right? But I'm just going to start, going to get my yarn so that it's looped, right? We're going to loop it around my thumb and my index finger there. And I'm going to go ahead and start. I think I'm going to go ahead and start my cast on here. Yeah. Okay, so... Okay, so this video is not an in-depth tutorial on how to do the long tail cast on, but basically when you do the long tail cast on, you want to get about 3 times as much yarn as the length of your project, right? So if your project were to be 10 inches, you'd need 30 inches of yarn plus about 6 inches for weaving in. I don't usually measure exactly, right? I just know what I want around my waist, and so I'm going to go about 3 times as much. I don't even start with a slip knot. A lot of people say start with a slip knot, but I've got my 2 needles held here parallel to each other with the points pointed in the same direction, and I drape that yarn over my needle. So up at the front here at the top, coming out the top, I've got the skein of yarn, and coming out the bottom I have the long tail. And then so on each side, right, of the 2 parallel needles at the top, we got the strand coming out from the skein, and out of the bottom we've got the tail. And so between those 2 strands of yarn, I stick my thumb and my index finger between those 2, and then I turn them upward so that my thumb is pointed up in the air. I don't know, like a hitchhiker, like a slingshot. I don't know what people like to call that. So that I have a loop of yarn over my thumb. So my yarn is looped over my thumb. And then I take my 2 needles held parallel and I dive them under into that loop, and I grab that strand of yarn. And then I go over to the strand that's looped over my index finger, and I grab that, and then I bring it back to my thumb, and I've now got I got my first 2 stitches on my needle, and I just go back and forth, taking both needles into the loop on my thumb, and then underneath the strand over my index finger, back to the loop on my thumb, and I've got 3 stitches on my needle, and I'm going to go ahead and keep doing it. And as I said, my cast on number for my pattern is 112. So I'm going to take that and I'm going to do a +1, and I am going to cast on 113 stitches. Okay, I'm going to pause the camera, cast on my 113 stitches, and I will get back with you. Okay, so here is what my project looks like. I've got my 2 needles parallel, right? I did get a little bit of an extra long tail, but that's not really too bad for me. Sometimes my tails are ridiculously long. But These are my two needles, and they're held parallel, the same end of this long circular needle. So now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to reach down into the loop at the end, and I'm going to pull one of those needles out, one of those needle tips out. It doesn't even matter which one, right? You just want one needle so that you can then turn it around so you can start to knit. Now what I do next is I start with my other needle, because I'm going to work on two circular needles. So I cast onto my wood needle. Now I've got my nickel plated needle. No matter what my pattern says to do, right, no matter how it starts, because remember I did my cast on number +1. So for the waistband of this skirt, it's going to be worked over knit 2, purl 2. So we're going to have a 4-stitch repeat. Well, no matter what that says, it says knit 2, purl 2, because I have this additional stitch. I'm going to knit that stitch. So when I cast on to join in the round, I just, no matter what else I'm doing, even if it were to start with a purl stitch, I knit that first stitch, and you knit it and forget it. That's what I tell myself. My first stitch, you knit it and forget it, meaning it does not count. And the pattern repeat. Knit it and forget it. And now I start my pattern repeat. So now I'm going to knit 1, knit 2. And now I can move my yarn to the front, and I can do a purl 1, purl 2. And then I'm going to move my yarn to the back, and I'm going to start again with a knit 1, knit 2, and then move my yarn to the front and do a purl 1 and a purl 2, and then move my yarn to the back. And now, of course, normally I would have 8 stitches on here, but I do have 9 because I do have this first knit stitch. So I'm going to go ahead and continue this process until I have my 56 and technically 57, right? The half of my stitches are going to be on the first needle. That's going to be 56 plus 1. So I'm going to have 57 stitches on this first needle, on needle 1, and I'll get back with you. Okay, so I have just worked my first 56 and technically 57 stitches onto the nickel plated needle. So now I'm just going to slide those down to the middle of the needle there, so that they're not too close to either end, because what we don't want to do is lose those stitches while we're working the second half on the needle. So now is where I can start working with the, oh my goodness, I got my yarn and my needle all tangled up here. Let's see, what am I doing here? Okay, I'm going to move that yarn. My last stitch was a purl stitch. So now I need to get it back to the back of the work so that I can start a knit stitch. So now is where I just slide those stitches to the middle of that front needle and just leave them there, right? Just leave them there. And now I'm going to take the other half of my second needle, my wooden needle, and I'm going to start working on that. So I'm going to start again with my knit 2, purl 2, right? So these are my second half. I want 56 stitches on this needle as well. So knit 1, knit 2, purl 1, And if you're a returning viewer, you do know that I knit and purl differently because I do it by feel. I knit continental. I'm going to move that yarn to the back, and then I throw with my left hand. And I'm going to knit one, knit two, and then we're going to move the yarn to the front and purl one and purl two, and then move the yarn to the back. And I'm going to keep going with this process, right, of my knit two, purl two, until I get to the last stitch. I'm going to have done my 55 out of 56 stitches. And I'm going to stop and I will get back with you, but do not work that last stitch. I'm going to show you what I do with my last stitch to join in the round. So I work this first round and don't connect it. We are going to join in the round at the end of round one. So I'm going to work 55 out of 56 stitches, and then I'll show you how I join in the round. Okay, I've got about 4 unworked stitches left here on my left hand needle. I'm going to do a knit 1, a knit 2, and then I'm going to move my yarn to the front. We're going to do a purl 1, and we are not going to work this last stitch. I'm just going to slip it over temporarily to the right hand needle, but I'm going to leave it unworked. And so now I want to get back to where to join in the round. So I want to go back to my front needle, to needle 1, and this is where our first stitch comes in. If you remember, I said we put on this extra stitch. This is our +1. This is our knit it and forget it stitch, right? It's just sitting there, right? We didn't even count it. We did our knit 2, purl 2, and we didn't even count it, right? It was knit, but we knit it and forget it, and then we start our pattern repeat of knit 1, knit 2, purl 1, purl 2. So technically, at the beginning, we have a knit 3, even though our pattern says knit 2. And the reason for that is because whatever your last stitch is, it could be a purl stitch, it could be a knit stitch, whatever it is. In this case, mine is a purl, okay? But if it were a knit, then we would do a knit 2 together. But in my case, my last stitch on this ribbing on the waistband is going to be a purl. So what I'm going to do now is take that unworked stitch that I temporarily placed on my end of my right hand needle, right? It's unworked. So now I'm going to take it to meet back up to the very beginning of my project, and this is where we join in the round. We take that unworked stitch and we slip it back over to the tip of what's going to be the left hand needle, or the beginning of our project. And now with my yarn in front, because my last stitch is a purl, I am going to take my last stitch and that first +1 stitch, and I am going to purl those two together, and that's it. I have now officially joined in the round without twisting. Yay for that, because joining in the round without twisting is incredibly difficult for me, and that's the only way I've really been able to successfully do it without twisting. Now, if my last stitch had been a knit stitch, then I would just knit those two together, okay? Whatever it is, if it's a knit 2, if your last stitch is a knit 1, then you do a knit 2 together. If your last stitch is a purl stitch, then you do a purl 2 together. And now I am ready to slide those stitches down to the middle of needle 2, right? My back needle, we want to slide them into the middle so that they don't go off the end of the needle. And we want to make sure again that our work, even though we joined without twisting, we do still need to check and feel this end. And before we start, we want to make sure that our stitches are not twisted, because even when you join without twisting, you can still, when you're working in the round, you can still twist your project. So you really, if you're working by feel especially, you really want to feel down that needle all the way to the loop at the edge, and you want to make sure that your stitches are not twisted. And then you can go ahead and grab, for me, it's going to be my nickel plated needle, and I can go ahead on round 2 and start my pattern, which again is just going to be knit 2, purl 2 all the way around for the 56 stitches on needle 1 and 56 stitches on needle 2 for 112 stitches. So now I should have, right, because we've done a purl 2 together, so now I should have the required number of stitches for my project, 112. All right, well, that's the video for today. Just a couple of tips and tricks that I use for casting on, and the casting on over the 2 needle tips. You can do that even if you're not working in the round, even if you're just working flat and you cast on tightly. You can cast on over 2 needle tips. And then for joining in the round, my tip for you is just take your cast on number and do a +1. And then when you go to join, just do a knit 2 together or a purl 2 together. Whatever your last stitch is, just work it together with that first additional +1. Okay, so you always just start out your project with a knit 1. We knit it and forget it. All right, well, I hope that this was helpful. Okay, until next time, happy stitching. Bye bye. Bye bye for now.